Tony DeWitt here, Missouri Appellate Attorney, retired. None of what follows is legal advice. I'm here to do some video for you today to talk about an interesting subject on the law, and here it is. Today we're going to talk about the trial in the murder of Dolph Thornton. Mr. Thornton, or Dolph, Young Dolph as he was called, that was his rapper name, was unalived by a number of competitors, you might say, or at least that's what the state alleges. And it's an interesting case because it does sort of give a picture of the gang and drug culture and rapper culture in the city of Memphis. But it's also interesting because, like many trials, it's a battle between two people. One of those persons is the state's prosecutor, and the other person is the defense attorney. And in this case, I believe there are some really big differences in the approach being taken by both. And I'm going to play about 5 minutes of the opening statement of the state, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to play about 5 minutes of the opening statement by the defense, and we're going to talk about that. The reason I'm going to do it in that manner is because I feel that would be the best way to sort of point out the differences between the styles of these two particular lawyers. And hopefully it will be as fun for you to listen to as it has been for me to do and think about. So without further ado, here we go.
Just after noon, about 12:20, 12:21, 2, 3, 4, in the afternoon. So, you can stop there. Can everybody see it? Yes, sir. This is Memphis, Tennessee. This neighborhood is close to the airport. It's called Orange Mound. It is a historic neighborhood in Memphis. One of the first predominantly black neighborhoods that had so much history, so much art and culture and such, significance that it used to be compared to Harlem in New York City. There was a time when it was particularly vibrant. Theater, arts. It's an important neighborhood in Memphis. It is less than 15 minutes from this building. Like I said, it's by the airport. In the 80s and 90s, it became riddled with crime, with drugs, with poverty, with gangs. It is trying hard nowadays to make a resurgence, to go back to what it was. There are families that have lived there for decades, generations. There are businesses and other things that have been there for decades. What we're looking at here is one of those Memphis businesses, a family business. This is the storefront of Makita's Cookies. This is the front of the store. This is its parking lot in front of it. Makita's Cookies. They sell butter cookies, basically. Some have icing on them. This is simple butter cookie. People say they're real good. In Memphis, they say they're fire. So we got a cookie store that sells fire butter cookies in the middle of the day at 12:21 in the afternoon.
I heard of your statement from
You can stop it here. All right. So in 2021, people thought that was like a Lamborghini or something because they hadn't seen the new Corvettes yet, really. They weren't around. That is, in fact, one of those new Corvettes. It has a special wrap on it, is what they call that. It's not something you can buy from the dealership. You have to get that done yourself. Well, here, that's a special wrap that the Memphis rapper artist, known Dolph, had on several of his vehicles. There's a couple times in this video we'll just have to wait. But it's a matter of seconds, and it's the last seconds of his life, so we can wait for him. He'll stop there first. All right. This taller man here in the yellow shirt, blue jeans, white shoes. His name is Adolph Thornton Jr. You've heard me read it a couple times now. He grew up in Memphis. Neighborhood he grew up in was Castalia, not terribly far from this. Also a neighborhood in South Memphis. You'll see a member of his family testify this week. She'll tell you a little bit about his background and his family. I'll tell you a little bit about him right now, though. He is an ambitious young man who is a rapper, Memphis rapper, who rapped about the things that he saw growing up and that he sees in his neighborhood in Memphis. Some of that is drugs, some of that is violence, some of that is crime, some of that is gangs. Whether or not we agree or disagree as to whether or not that subject matter, are things we should be listening to or not, I can assure you it's real. You rapped about stuff that is real. You rapped about stuff that was real. And one of the things that meant everything to him in terms of what is real is he wanted to make it for himself. He wanted to make it for himself. He wasn't interested. He wasn't interested in joining others. He wasn't interested in being promoted by other people.
So I'm going to stop it right there, and I'm going to explain what he's been doing and how I think he's been doing it. He is trying to humanize Dolph, young Dolph, to the jury. He's trying to let them know that this young man had aspirations and dreams and wanted to go places, and he wanted to have his own record label because he wanted to promote other artists. He wanted to be, a good finder, so to speak. And he had made mentions of the family and other sorts of things. He is basically trying to humanize the victim. But one of the problems, from my point of view, if I was sitting in that jury box, I would be thinking, did you maybe not practice this before you just got up here and just rambled off the cuff? Did you not maybe sit down and think about an outline for where you were going to go with this? You will notice that there are long pauses in this video where he's either waiting for something to happen or just not saying anything. Now, eventually, he does get to the actual unaliving part. And of course, I'm not going to show that on here because that would offend YouTube's sensibilities, and we don't want to do that. But you can go and find the video on a number of different platforms if you want to see that. It's not really particularly anything that would be worth watching, in my opinion. But again, I worked in an emergency room. I saw the results of this kind of stuff all the time. And I have to tell you, it's not anything that would be of entertainment value to a normal or reasonable person. So moving right along, I felt like his pacing was terrible. It's almost like they put him here. He's got to do this case. And he's trying to tell you what's going on. That kind of pacing may work if you are a preacher and you have power in your voice and you can use a pause effectively, but he's not doing that. He isn't using his voice to motivate the jury. He's doing a very bland presentation of this evidence. Now, maybe he feels that's necessary given the gravity of the crime. Maybe there's somebody on the jury who is, of particular sensitivity or something like that. That I don't know. But this is not the opening that I would do. If this were my case and I were the prosecutor, I would stand up and say, young Dolph deserved to live. He had a future in front of him. He had a career in front of him. I don't listen to his music, but a lot of other people do. This was a kid who was going places, and that guy's sitting right over there. He's the reason why he isn't going there. And I feel like that would have been a much better way to start this off than this rather low-key Marvin the Paranoid Android sort of approach to this particular opening. Now, he lays out a lot of the evidence in this, and he does it through video because there are different videos. He talks about the different evidence that's going to come in. And when he gets through with his opening statement, it certainly looks bad for the defendant. And of course, what the defendant doesn't realize is that he is sitting there and he's playing with his pen and moving his hands back and forth the whole time. And of course, they're showing him as opposed to the person who's speaking. So that's an issue that I have with their camera people not really understanding what in the heck they are doing, as is frequently the case with media. But for whatever reason, they're showing him, and he is very clearly nervous. So when he finished his presentation, I'm like, okay, you get a C- on this, but I think you hit all the marks you needed to hit. And then the defense attorney got up, and let's take a listen to some of his opening statement.
Now, Mr. Hagerman's a very skilled attorney, did a great opening statement. But there's always two sides. And there are certain things about this case that I'm going to urge you to be paying particular attention to. You heard a little bit about Govan. And I anticipate you'll get to hear from Govan in this case. You already heard you're going to be hearing from Mr. Smith. And Mr. Hagerman talked about Mr. Govan and said he liked to, get an interest in young rappers, right? He liked to exploit. He liked to exploit young rappers. Like Mr. Johnson. He brings no skill to the table, but you're going to hear testimony about how he intended. It was his sole mission to get a 30 to 60% piece of Mr. Johnson. You're going to hear him say, oh man, Mr. Johnson was going to go platinum. And he and his god brother had missed out on this golden opportunity for another rapper, and they weren't going to let that go by. They weren't going to let that go by again. And so he gets his claws into Mr. Johnson. All right? And what you're going to hear is, as the process goes on, is the idea is that he's going to sign with CMG, Mr. Johnson is. But there comes a point in the road where what Mr. Govan wants, which is a meal ticket, the payday, and what Mr. Johnson wants, differ. And you're going to hear about how they take this trip to Atlanta. And the whole idea is that they're going to go to Atlanta, and this is Mr. Govan's chance. He's got another guy he's going to bring in to help sell the management contract, which is going to give him this massive piece of this young up-and-coming artist. And you're going to hear, this is about September of 21. This is right before November. And you're going to hear that they go to Atlanta to meet Jook, who is one of the higher-ups at CMG. Right? They go to Atlanta, and while in Atlanta, Mr. Johnson decides, I'm not going to go your way. I'm not going to go your way, Govan. I'm not going into business with you. I'm going to do it without you. And at that moment, I anticipate you're going to hear Mr. Govan say he was really mad. He felt some kind of way about the fact that he had, in his mind, his perception was he had done all this to help this up and coming star, and now he was going to be left to the wayside, and he wasn't going to get a piece. And he's so angry that he leaves Mr. Johnson in Atlanta. Leaves him there. Mr. Johnson has to find another way home. You know, Mr. Hagerman talked about, it's not 1981, right? It's 2024 now. It's 21 when this happened. But there are certain things that are as old as time. And that's greed, right? Pride, and deceit. And that's what Mr. Govan has, is greed. And then he gets angry because if he can't get a piece of this young artist, nobody can. Nobody can. It's time to tank this one, because he's not going to go to it. And Govan, you're going to hear, and the state has said, is soliciting. He's in the middle of this thing with Dolph. It's going to be important for you through this case to really pay attention to credibility. When you hear witnesses like Govan testify, why is he saying what he's saying? What's he getting at? He's getting something. And you're going to hear it. He's got a vested interest in making sure that he saves his own hide. And takes this young rapper, this young man, off the board. Since he wasn't going to go with him in the first place. Since he abandoned him. And decided not to share any of his money going forward. The same is to be said for Mr. Smith. You're going to hear from Mr. Smith. And Mr. Hagerman tells you, he says he's going to tell you that was being injustice. You will also hear about other things Mr. Smith has said during the same time that he's been meeting with the state, meeting with law enforcement, trying to save himself. And while he's doing this, while he's meeting with them and telling them this story, you're also going to hear he's writing letters to his family and telling his family, I didn't really do this. I didn't really do this. I'm just going to get the deal. I just want the deal. I want you to know I didn't do it.
For a guy who had an uphill battle to begin with, I think he did a really good job so far in that opening. In fact, I would have given him an A- on his opening, and I don't know any more about the case really than what I've told you. I haven't seen any of the evidence. I heard about this case at the time that it happened, and I sort of filed it back there in the memory banks because there was an issue of one of them made a claim maybe of self-defense at some point. But it's an interesting case to me because of the way that things unfolded. And now it's even more interesting because there's this huge difference between the prosecutor and the defense attorney. So here's what I'm going to suggest is going to happen throughout the balance of this case going forward. The prosecutor is going to get up, he's going to do a direct examination, and then this guy, this defense attorney, is going to get up and disassemble that direct exam piece by piece by piece by piece. I believe the prosecutor's overmatched here, and I think that's going to have be reflected in the outcome. Trials are about narratives, and what the defense attorney has done here is he's provided a reasonable alternative narrative. He has basically said, look, they didn't find any DNA, and they didn't find any fingerprints in that car, where the one that they tied to the shooting. And just because something looks similar doesn't mean that it's the same. He has, I think, provided a very good set of facts that the jury could hang their hat on and say, well, no, I don't think this guy's guilty. So it'll be interesting to see where this case goes. If you have any comments, drop them in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Let me know who you think did a better job on this opening, particularly if you had the opportunity to watch all of it. It's an interesting trial, and it's on Law and Crime, and it's also on the local television stations in Memphis. So, and at least on YouTube. So please, if you have an opportunity, chime in. Let me know what you think. That's what I have for you today. Again, love to hear your comments on this. If you would, find somebody nice, do a nice thing for them, make their day, make your day, and then come on back tomorrow. Join me down here at the beach. We'll talk about something. We'll probably talk about this again. Hey, as I said at the beginning, none of what I said is legal advice. But let me tell you what, the stuff that's going to be right up here, these are the things that YouTube thinks you might be interested in going forward. Have a terrific day.